Wonderful. Thanks for the intro, Kirti. Okay, so maybe more people will be jumping in at some point, but can just start with a small introduction of myself. So I'm Ben Berthaud. I'm from France, and I've been involved in an NGO for the last 5 years that is called Climate Fresk, that some of you may have know at some point. I know that some people were in the workshop on Monday we had. So just a short introduction, and I'll have some slides to tell you a bit more later. The Climate Fresk is a workshop basically to better understand what is climate change, and it lasts for 3 hours, and we dig onto the scientific reports actually of the IPCC to spread the word about the climate change situation worldwide. And this morning, I wanted to focus a bit more on climate education at large and the role of climate education at the Conference of Parties on Climate that are happening every year. As you may know, this year it's in Baku. Last year it was in Dubai. The year before it was in Egypt. And the year even before it was in Glasgow. We have 55 minutes ahead of us. I have not that much slides, so it's going to be not too long, my presentation. I'm happy to have a chat on whatever topic related to COPs and climate education. I personally went to 2 COPs, so I don't know if some of you guys went also, but it would be nice to have a chat also on these big moments of the year that sometimes are a bit frustrating because they don't translate that much into our everyday life. But yeah, that's about the program for today. And I can share my screen now, find the button. Stop, that should work. Okay, can you see the screen now? Yeah, super. Okay, let me pull that full screen. Is that full screen or not full screen?
Full screen.
Okay. Can still see the, well, let me go and check one thing. Yeah, okay, that's even better. All right. So about today's schedule, first some slides so that you understand a bit more what is the Climate Fresk NGO and tool. And just on a technical point, Kirti, you just letting people in, or should I click on the button? Cool. Then I thought it was an interesting point to go through a brief history of the Conference of Parties as they became more and more famous over the years. So just a small look back on how they developed over the years. Within the UN system. So I have a few slides on that. Then I will present the role of climate education of the last 4 COPs, so including COP25 in Madrid. Focusing then on Climate Fresk at these same COPs, and we'll have a discussion towards the end on any topics related to climate education and Conference of Parties. All right, so what is Climate Fresk? Well, Climate Fresk, as I told you, it's quite simple. It's one NGO, one workshop, one movement. And the workshop is based on cars, as you can see on the table over here. And it's basically cards, 42 of them, that are taken out of the IPCC report. And the goal of the participants that you have here around the table is to build a mind map of what is climate change. So with these cards, they're supposed to put them on the table and make links between the cards. The advantage of the tool is that people are learning by doing. So you're not having a 3-hour conference on climate change. You really grasp the knowledge by getting these cards and trying to understand them by putting them on the table with people around the table. But of course, there's a facilitator, but the facilitator is not there to like give the correction to the people. It's more to the people to come to a solution through collective intelligence. So super nice bottom-up approach. Yeah. So the tool itself has been born 5 years ago in France, but it is now an internationally approved workshop on climate change. It's quite a fast snowball rolling, as it's 3 hours workshop, and then to become a facilitator of the workshop, you just have to go for a training that is also 3 hours. So in 6 hours, you can be an agent of climate education worldwide just with a set of cards. So that is kind of the magic of the tool. I will give you a bit more of the numbers, statistics we have seen of development of Climate Fresk over the last years. It's quite exponential. As I told you in my introduction a few minutes earlier, the workshop is quite is quite scientific. I mean, it's absolutely scientific as it's based on the IPCC report, so the Intergovernmental Panel, sorry, on climate change, that you may know of, I suppose, that are basically the people reporting every 5 or 6 years on the status of climate change worldwide. And it's basically like hundreds and hundreds of scientists that are coming together to build consensus on where we are in terms of climate change. And yeah, of course, in this report, you have different climate change causes and consequences. And this is what we have retrieved in our workshop. So basically, Climate Fresk is kind of a digestion of the IPCC report, as these ones are super, 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 super long. We're talking about more than 3,000 pages for some of them, and they're not that accessible because they're very scientific and because it's super long. So at Climate Fresk, the initial idea was to bring this report to the greater public with a tool. It's a team building tool, Climate Fresk. As I said earlier, we put participants around the table, 4 to 7 people, and based on collective intelligence, the Climate Fresk fosters team spirits and trains soft skills such as collaboration and active listening. So there is a facilitator there that is there to ensure good communication within the group. Different parts of the workshop are first we go through very scientific topics, so more like brainy stuff, and that is for an hour and a half. And then the second hour and a half is dedicated more to like our emotions in relation to climate change. And the last part, what we call the hands, it's more dedicated to the solutions and actions when talking about tackling climate change. And so the principal goal of climate change is actually to get the participants at the end of the workshop informed and empowered to take action and become a driver for transformation and inspire change among peers. And as I told you earlier on, it's quite simple to go to that step, as you do the workshop 3 hours, you do a training 3 hours, and then you can spread the word around you as you feel. Some numbers now about the Climate Fresk over the last 5 years. So we are almost on 2 million workshop participants. And if you go, do I have a pointer here? No, I don't have a pointer. Well, down there you have also the number of, or maybe I have a pointer here. Sorry, let me put it on. Yeah. So almost 2 million workshop participants. Down here, we are reaching almost 90,000 facilitators, like myself, for example. I didn't say it earlier, but the workshop is tailored for anyone. It can be companies, that can be higher education establishment, that can be public organization, governments, whoever. There is an adult version that is roughly from 15, 16 years old onwards. And we have developed a shorter and simplified version of it that is the junior version for 10 to 15 years old kids. We are now in 150 countries, and the set of cards, the 42 cards, have been translated into 45 languages. So over the last 5 years, the Climate Fresk has proven to be a reference tool for qualitative, accessible climate education. As I told you, we're almost reaching 2 million participants over 150 countries. All right, jumping into today's topic now. Starting with the brief history of the conference of parties on climate, because as you may know, there are also conference of parties on biodiversity, as the one in Montreal last year. But the famous one are the ones on climate that we call COP. So a small timeline that I've put here. Starting with the Stockholm Conference back in 1972, which basically was the first ever global colloque bringing the environmental question as a priority. And this is at that time that the UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme, was created. And this UNEP is now a big actor worldwide for support to environmental actions from the UN side. 20 years later, in 1992, we had the first definition of what today is known all over the place as the sustainable development. And what is interesting for us, we had the creation of the Conference of Parties. This was all under something that is known as the Rio Declaration. COP1 happened 3 years later in Berlin. And for the first time, quantified goals were in the text out of the COP. In these quantified goals were in terms of CO2 emission reduction. That was the first time this was addressed. In 1996, at the COP2, we had it in Geneva, and for the first time, it was recognized that climate change represents a threat for humanity. So yeah, we were coming from far, but moving slowly but surely. COP3 that you may have heard of because it's a bit famous than the others with the Kyoto protocol. It was the first constraining protocol ever. It was aiming at framing the the CO2 emission reduction. In 2002, it was normally nothing special. It's just in terms of agenda. Iceland ratified the Kyoto Protocol, and with Iceland, the number threshold of 55 countries was passed, meaning in diplomatic rules that the protocol was validated. So for the first time, we had a mechanism that was constraining countries. COP21 in Paris, years later in 2015, quite a famous one, with the Paris Agreement, that I quote here, to keep global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. And what is the magic or the big achievement in Paris is that all countries agreed on publishing their reduction goals on that COP. All right, focusing now on climate education. Over the last 4 COPs, so COP25, COP26, COP27, COP28. I mean, there is one happening right now in Baku, but of course I don't have news from it. So some achievements over the different COPs. In 2019, the COP was in Madrid, and it was the introduction of the Action for Climate Empowerment, which is basically a mechanism from the UN to highlight the need for education to empower youth and communities. And as of course it was the beginning of it, at the time it was underfunded and lacking commitments. COP26 in Glasgow, the climate education was mentioned in the Glasgow Climate Pact, and the idea is roughly the same at each COP, is to incorporate climate change curricula into the school education programs. And there were youth advocacy groups that pushed for policy commitments. One of them that is famous is Yongo, that you may have heard of. We may talk a bit about it later. COP27, an action plan for the action for climate empowerment, a lot of action, but the ACE action plan, what we call it, over 2023-27, introduced to mainstream global climate education. And the idea behind it was that we need to educate people so that they get climate skills to enable the just transition. COP28 in Dubai 2023, it was, I will give you a few slides, especially on COP28, as I was there last year. It was, yeah, continuous classic business as usual, emphasizing on ACE. And yeah, focusing on the funding that was lacking on the previous COP. And that's roughly about it. Yeah, I'll give you a bit more details about it later anyway. All right, so just some key trends at COPs that we can recognize here. It used to be something not really at the center, but it has, over the years, over the COPs, gain in recognition, and it is now a central topic, and it's appearing in every text of each COP. There is a general consensus about the lack of binding policies. And actually, unfortunately, there are a few formal commitments to enforce climate education worldwide. I know that Italy is actually one of the first countries that have put climate education curricula as mandatory in every school program over the country. But yeah, we're talking about one country, so it's moving slowly, unfortunately. There are funding gaps that are clearly identified. The education initiatives still lack sufficient funding. And on this one, there is a report from the World Bank that has estimated that per student, we would need $20 everywhere in the world to ensure that the student has qualitative training on climate change. So that is not something that is a small amount. And I think we're talking about like $20 per year. Implementation and equity. Of course, as we're talking about education, there is a matter of equity between people so that we all have the same knowledge. This is something we experience quite directly in the Climate Fresk workshop, is that around the table, there are always people that are super, super knowledgeable on the topic and some others that are less. And that makes it quite challenging to have this discussion about climate change because it's a hot topic and it involves a lot of other domains. So the goal of climate education also is to go for as much equitable as possible. And of course, we're talking about educating people in developing nations, and that's the focus of the board of Climate Fresk over the last year, is to try to address these topics and adapt the tool to different cultures so that we reach these people also. And as I told you earlier on, there is still a topic about funding for global climate literacy effort and accountabilities. Of course, it's hard to follow a general trend worldwide. But as I told you, we have some signs around Italy going for a curriculum about climate change. The World Bank releasing this report. I mean, things are moving. All right, now focusing on Climate Fresk at COP 25, 26, and 27. Putting here the general goals that we had. They were evolving years after years, right, between different COPs. But basically, those are the three main goals we had at every COP. So the first one was to advocate climate change action by convincing a certain number, this number is for COP28, certain number of decision makers. And as you know, this is the good point about COPs is that you get all these important people at the same place. So state actors, private actors, international organizations, higher education that can all become partners of your cause, of your NGO. The goal was also to touch on negotiators, which are not very accessible, but as much as possible to spread a shared understanding of climate issues in their ecosystem. And for us, it was through the deployment of Climate Fresk workshop. That second topic is actually linked with what I said earlier on climate literacy equity. We would like to have everyone the same knowledge, especially negotiators, so that they can have comprehensive and detailed discussions on the topic and come with key solutions that are not like out of the box, but more like really coming from the ground. Second goal, I said it a bit in the first point, but is to create a basis for a long-term relationship with key climate education actors. Of course, we're far than being the only ones in there, but it's also the time for us at COPs to meet them and talk about achievements, outlooks for the future, all these topics. And for us, more Climate Fresk centered topic is to take care of every facilitator that we call Fresker in the Climate Fresk world. And of course, enjoy your time over there for the international committee. And big goal for us each time we go, and that was true in Glasgow, in Madrid, in Egypt and Dubai. But Egypt and Dubai a bit more. It was to grow the regional community. As for example, in Egypt, it was not a very big community before we came there. And just going there with trainers, able to train new people, new facilitators, it's also the opportunity to grow the community. All right. So some pictures now. It's may sound a bit like a photo album, but this was at COP 26, and actually COI, as you can see on the left, COI 16. So you may ask, what is COI, or a local COI? So it's a local conference of youth, and it's happening every year before the COP. And it's organized by Yongo, the constituency mandated by the UN to bring the voice of youth on climate change negotiations and discussions. So we are trying every year to be there and organize workshops for these guys so that, as I said earlier on, we bring the same and equitable climate literacy for everyone. Other topic, other format we have at every COP is this banner with some quiz. The advantage of it is that we can go all over the place. So that was at COP 26, On the green zone, maybe some of you are familiar with this. The green zone is the public zone of every COP, and there is a blue zone where you need a badge. Our action was quite successful on every COP because we could have many people. So I'm talking about 40 to 50 facilitators involved at every single COP, and we could be all over. So there is an example of these guys just in front of the green zone at COP26, but we were all over the place. Yeah, training, having the police from Glasgow. This was the group we brought to Glasgow. Quite an easy reach, of course, reachable from basically anywhere in Europe. And I think have some numbers. Yes, some numbers about what we achieved at COP 26. So more than 400 workshop participants, 1,800 quiz participants. So the quiz that I showed you just a bit earlier, and more than 2,000 people who know about Climate Fresk. So the aim there is really to talk to the maximum of people. Same story, new team for COP 27, a bit more sunny, as you can see, compared to Glasgow. Again, another LCOI, this one, the LCOI 17, with a lot of people involved, and quite a diverse public that is of that is super in our goal for us, is to reach these communities also. And I was saying earlier on, to grow communities in Africa, for example. Well, that was really a key moment for us. Some other activities we do on COPs is always to partner with different pavilion, and an easy one is the Pavillon de la Francophonie, so the French-speaking pavilion. And this one is always an opportunity for us to meet people from all over the world and talk about our tool. Right, a small focus now on the last COP, I mean, the one for last year, climate education at COP 28. Just wanted small under bracket on COP 28. Let's see what COP 28 has for us, though it's expected to be a bit less impressing COP. But the one in COP 28 was supposed to be very promising. I mean, in terms of what the text says out of COP 28 is quite impressive, but we're not very sure about the consequences it had on our everyday life, as I said in my intro. But still, at COP 28, it was the signal that finally we were coming to the beginning of the end of fossil fuels, with, for the first time in the text, this small quote that I have here, transitioning away from fossil fuels. And that was the first time this was put in the, take it as you want. It was not put in the text in Glasgow, in Egypt. It was put in Dubai. So, I mean, that's still an achievement on that side. And something happened at COP28 that is called the global stock take, sorry. And it was the first one, and it's basically a mechanism to count the CO2 emissions and to report, sorry, the CO2 emissions in an automatized way. Okay, brackets closed on climate education at this COP. Two aspects that are quite interesting. 38 countries have committed to integrating climate education within their nationally determined contributions. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's basically the reports that every country has to send to the UN or the UNFCCC, so the UN body that is organizing the COPs. All the countries under COP texts, they have to send their NDC, their nationally determined contributions, to report on the evolution of the CO2 emissions, I don't know, in like 5 or 10 years or even more. And at COP28, it was for the first time that so many countries, 38, have committed to integrate it climate education within their reports. It was a good aspect also with COP28. It was that on the program there was a full day dedicated to youth, children, education, and skill. So you may know or not that the COPs are usually spread over 12 or 14 days. And each day, each day has a topic. So you have one day about the energy, you have one day about finance, you have one day about equity, diversity, for example. And for the first time, there was a day dedicated to youth, child education, and skills, which was a good news, though we were not entirely convinced about that day at Climate Fresk. As the title says, it's about youth, children, education, and skills. So for us, to us, it was really oriented as we need climate education for the young people and just for the young people. While to us, at Climate Fresk and in many actually climate education organizations, the goal is also to bring this knowledge to decision makers and negotiators, I said earlier on, that sometimes don't know and don't get the entirety of the problem and all the ins and all the outs. So that is something that is really important for us, is that climate education is not only framed into like youth programs, but goes much further than that. So we did a manifesto at COP28 that was developed by Climate Fresk and signed by a few partners of us to split this day for each future COP into a youth day, into an education day, and into a skill day. So far, we didn't receive an answer to that. But yeah, we at least send a message that we were not, we would like to have something that a full day dedicated to education day. Let's see how it evolves in the future. As I told you earlier on, one good point is that over the years, climate education comes centered into the table. And that's about it for me. So if you have any questions or discussions or I don't know, gut feeling about COPs. How are we doing on time? Alexander.
Thank you for this presentation. I think it was great, and I think the job you're doing at Climate Fresk is also great. My question to you is, how do you manage and how do you teaching young people education about climate at COPs, which I believe are starting to lose their value very fast, especially as I see them as countries going there and just showing off, especially with reports going that there won't be any fossil fuels on the agenda for COP29, and the team leaders being secretly filmed talking about and selling fossil fuels. So how do you keep that motivation with young people, training them when they're seeing that there's no any real actual progress done by the countries involved?
So you've been focusing on the COP happening in Baku at the moment. Yeah, well, it's a tough question. In general, it's the public of youth. Sometimes we get people that are not very motivated. It's also a very long workshop for them, 3 hours. I guess what is always a source of motivation for us facilitators of Climate Fresk is that we hope that around the table of 7 people, there may be some that are like fully into fossil fuels, like not believing in climate change, but there may be others on the other side of the table that are completely like into climate change. And what we want to have, and that is also the power of Climate Fresk, is to bring all these people around one table and that they speak to each other. And I guess that's a big source of motivation for me.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other question? I'm reading the chat. Question from Cyrus. Do you have more detailed info on these 30 countries? No, sorry, I don't have the list, but you can find it online on the UNFCCC website, I think. Isn't it climate education part of the UN Education of Sustainable Development? I assume they are only pledges about integrating ESD into curriculums. Do you have info about the states in Italy? The decision was already in 2019. No, unfortunately, I don't have information on that. No, sorry. If anyone has an update on Italy, of course, that's the frustrating part I was telling you at the beginning of my presentation, is that COPs is a lot about talking, pledging, as Cyrus you say. So sometimes you get like two beautiful announcement, wow, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, blah, 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 and it doesn't translate into the real everyday life. So that's the really frustrating part. I guess one good thing of going there at the COP with an NGO is that you have a direct feeling on what you can have as an impact. So for example, Climate Fresk, the goal is to get more people to know about climate change. Well, we have a direct track of how many people we reach at these COPs. So it's a bit less frustrating. But yeah, good question, Cyrus. If I don't know if you can get the info online. Question from Victoria: how are the cards updated according to the IPCC? Are they added or do they have to be replaced? Yeah, good question. So over the last 5 years, I think we've got 9 or 10 updates, major updates. And of course, we're following the IPCC updates. So each time there is an IPCC report that is released, I mean, big ones are every 5 or 6 years, but there are special ones, for example, on cities or forests that are released every, 2 years sometimes. So we update the cards accordingly, and usually we try to keep this 42 cards package. So we replace cards. We used to have, for example, in the first versions, a card on the Gulf Stream weakening over the world, and it has now been replaced as in the last IPCC report. It was not that of an important effect. We decided to insert a more social dimension with a card about inequalities. Namita, does Fresk follow up with participants after the workshop to learn more about the impact it had on individuals and communities? Well, that's actually the key question we have at the moment at the board of Climate Fresk that I joined a year earlier, is that Climate Fresk is a very fast and big snowball rolling. Unfortunately, as any social movement, I guess we can call it like this, it's very hard to track with numbers and make it accountable of what is the impact on there. So we lack a bit of accountability on there, or reporting, I guess we can call it like this. The only thing we have grip on is the number of facilitators that are active. So we know these guys are people that changed something in their career or adapted something in their everyday life. I don't know, there can be small actions, but avoiding taking planes, being vegetarian. This we have a grasp on. But the rest we don't have, and this is actually one of the goal with this year board, is to implement a reporting system so that we can get more numbers on what happened in these communities, and as you said, the impacts. Olesia, so you replace the cards for all facilitators? Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, as the more we are facilitators worldwide, the more challenging it is to like bring the same version to everyone, but yeah, there is an announcement worldwide to say, okay, guys, we have an update on the cards, and this is really important to follow it, as we are based on scientific reports, so we have to follow the source of knowledge over there. Linka, do you have a question? Do we have stats on how many Fresk participants become facilitators? Yeah, good question. The turnover rate. It has been calculated, but it's not the latest number. I think it was 2 or 3 people out of 7 for every workshop. Yeah. So we're not talking about a big number, though it's still an interesting number for us, as then when you become facilitator, it's easy to jump in. Any other question on COPs maybe, or do any one of you go to COP or went to COP? Any gut feeling on COPs?
So I have no about the COPs is we can visit it independent as a normal citizen.
Well, as I told you in the presentation, there is a green zone that is open to like public. Of course, this is not where the negotiations are happening, but this is basically a copy of the blue zone with like many events and conferences and workshops that is really interesting to attend actually. And then if you want to go to the blue zone where the negotiations are happening, and I mean, of course, with like an NGO badge, for example, you don't have access to negotiations. That makes sense, right? But you can meet a lot of people and mingle with a lot of people. This is not that complicated in the sense that every NGO that is recognized by UNFCCC, so we're talking about, not so big NGOs, like I think we're talking about like 3,500 NGOs worldwide. They get 2 to 3 badges for every COP. So then it's a matter of like being involved in an NGO and raising your hand and say, I'd be interested to go there for that reason, to sell our actions or that kind of stuff. And if in your NGO it's not possible, what is possible to do is also to like partner with other NGOs to arrange for the badge distribution. So, and we're talking about like, for example, in Dubai, it was 90,000 people on the blue zone. So there are opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, you recommend to get involved in some of NGOs. And as a facilitator in the Climate Fresk, I'm really interested to have participate in a workshop and maybe become a facilitator and spread it in Portuguese. And then next year, the COP 30 in Brazil. So it's possible if it's as a facilitator to join a group of the Climate Fresk, or
You mean a group that goes to COP, or?
oh, I think you are frozen or lost my connection.
No. Can you hear me? No? Hello, hello. We lost her. Well, she'll come back. Any other question in the meantime? You're back.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was asking, joining a group like locally in Portugal or joining the group that goes to COP?
Join the group that goes to COP in Brazil. This COP
Yeah.
30 is in Brazil.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and it's expected to be a big COP. So it's gonna be
And
super.
it's possible to join the Climate Fresk, for example, as a facilitator
Yeah, I mean, if you become a Climate Fresk facilitator
with
this
a
year,
student,
yeah,
with a
you
group
can.
of students, for example.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We usually try to bring as many people as possible as Climate Fresk, and we are always looking for people to support us for like the COP preparation. And if you're in that team, I mean, we're not talking about like a straightforward path, right? Still, there are like a limited number of badges, but you can position yourself and yeah, try to get in there. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, if it's not possible through Climate Fresk, it's good to reach like to other NGOs. This is what we advise anyone to do all the time, because of course, out of these 3,500 NGOs that are recognized by UNFCCC and that have badges, they're not going all of them. So there are badges that are not used all over the place, and it's like finding them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. I think there's Cyrus, another question. Would you have any info on the development of the nature protocol, like the GHG greenhouse gases for CO2? Sorry, I'm not a full expert on COPs and all the UN protocols. Maybe you want to say a few words if you know this protocol? But, yeah, I cannot say more than that. Nicolette, is the green zone free? Yes, that is. You just need to sign up online and you get tickets entrance for 1 day, for example, and then you can go. And I think 100% of the activities in there are for free. It's really great opportunity. I mean, of course, we're not gonna go to Azerbaijan just to go to the green zone, but like for example, in Glasgow, it was just around the corner for many people in Glasgow. They were coming just for a day, and it was a great way to like get also the great public into the COP activities. Any other question? Cyrus. So we can choose my microphone well. No worries. Thanks for your question. Still a lot to learn on that. Done? Any final words? Gut feeling you have? If not, I think we can close here. I wanted to thank you very much for coming this morning. Hope you learned some stuff about the COPs, about Climate Fresk. Hope to see you in one of the future COPs, maybe in Brazil. Yeah, hope you had a wonderful week with the European Climate Carry Week. I guess you attended a lot of events. Great, really great event over there. And I hope this will be helpful for finding your path in the transition carriers that you're after. Wonderful day, everyone, and wonderful weekend. And keep in touch in this beautiful sphere that we're in. Bye bye.